Okay, thank you, Ajahn Siripan, for your constructive feedback and views. Now the floor is open. The first person that I'll come back to the panel to is Professor Suchit from the issues that have been raised. The no confidence provision that has been taken out, as Ajahn said. So if we go revert to the previous arrangement. So if you lose the no confidence, you resigned, and then you can form a new government with the same parliament, same lower house. You don't have to have a new election.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Thitinan, and thank you very much for organizing a very interesting and timely seminar, which provokes a lot of questions. I have two about empowerment of citizens. The first one is quite obvious to me. If this is a constitution that is supposed to empower citizens, how come citizens are not trusted to approve or disapprove of it in a referendum? Now, this is a political question and a quite rhetorical one, so I don't expect you to answer it. But my other question, I would like someone to comment on whether there are any provisions in the draft constitution to strengthen civilian control over the military, to reduce the military as a political force in Thai politics, or is it kept open, just in case? Thank you.
We have informed unofficially to the government that the CDC would like to see a referendum as a final vote for the draft of the constitution. So although the interim constitution hasn't said anything about referendum of the draft, but we agree that we wanted to have a referendum on this. So it's up to the government to change the interim constitution if they want that way. It seemed to me that what I heard unofficially that a number of the people in the cabinet themselves or in the council, the peace and order council, they seem to agree with the referendum, but it needs time to prepare. Thank you.
On civilian control, the last time we had some semblance of civilian control over the military, I think the heyday of the late 1990s, Professor Panitan was advisor to the Prime Minister, and the Defense Minister at that time was a civilian, doubling as Prime Minister, Kun Chulalongkorn. So, Ajahn Panitan, civilian control?
Well, it is an ongoing project or process. You know very well it takes quite a few efforts to do that. Last time we did a major reform, simply perhaps the economic crisis of 1997 helped us to reduce about 80,000 positions in the defense ministry. We closed down a lot of military operations overseas, and we began to initiate a few different systems, including arms procurement and also appointments, reshuffles, which is of course one of the causes of the coup d'etats in the last few decades. That is done because of the help of the economic crisis. The second civilian defense minister, Mr. Chulalongkorn, who I worked with under 1997, was not liked by the military until these days. The military told us that they are not going to elect Democrat leaders or MPs in the constituencies, and it is so too. In every military constituencies, Democrats failed to deliver, the winning ticket. Although they did very good works in terms of sending troops to East Timor, for example, during the crisis, I was part of that, administration. The military appreciate the administration by sending them to do the peacekeeping for the first time. They were not prepared to do it. We pushed them in that regard to do the job. But that is very sensitive area. this defense minister, on the first day, September 16, when I came to the Ministry of Defense, gave me an assignment to look into the reform process. Again, with a different environment, it's more difficult when you have full military power, in politics, and you need to do the reform at the same time. So we are now beginning to look around and trying to find new helps, new expert groups from overseas to come and to begin to talk about this reform process. I think the first group will come to the ministry in the next few weeks. We already have some appointments with some embassies to begin to look into this, to make sure that this new reform process will touch on different issues, including the preparation for the new strategic environment overseas, rise of China, and also troubles at seas. I think this week, this very day, the defense minister is in China, looking around for new cooperations in the defense areas, including in terms of purchase. I think we had successful meeting with the Indian top security advisor and also Russian Prime Minister on the same thing. What I'm trying to say is that it will be a new kind of reform, and I hope the Reform Council will pick up on this, but it's more difficult, more challenging, because the military is in full power of politics in reforming them, during, the classic saying, in wartime, you don't do reform in the military. The US has not been successful in reforming itself during Vietnam War. And after Vietnam War, then it's not easy for them to do the reform, leading into troubles in Lebanon, in Middle East. So that kind of initiative need to be pushed around from many sectors. We were hoping that the people in Thailand will push for the military reform, but it's not yet easy and for the Thai people to be very much on the military reform. But I hope this is one of the groundworks that the CDC will lay down in the future, and then allow us to continue to do this reform process. Thank you.
Yes, the reforms of the late 90s were also enabled by a reform-minded Army Chief, General Surayut Chulalongkorn, who eventually became later on the Prime Minister during the previous coup, who was again staying longer in that post. So apart from civilian control, we had also even broader security sector reforms in the late 1990s. But I think the pendulum has gone the other way.
If it does plan to have an Article 44, under what conditions specifically would it be invoked?
Well, we did not discuss directly the Section 44 of the interim constitution, but we discussed something pretty much like the Article 16 of the French Constitution, the emergency power. But in the end, we dropped that. So, to your answer, to your question, will be easy to say no.
See, our constitution is heavily influenced by the French constitution, as you can see.
Only some part, because like Dr. Thawilwadee was saying, we are also influenced by the Austrian constitution on the general responsive budget. And German as well on the MMP, yes. And United States, Japan, so on and so forth.
Eclectic, okay.
First, according to the voting system, I'm a great fan of the preferential voting system that the Australians have, because I feel that it's not first past the post. It reflects the degree to which people like or dislike certain candidates. If you have 5 candidates, you can vote. You don't just check the candidate that you want, but you list them according to your preference. So you list them 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if you hate, all of them except for one, then you just put 1. And if someone doesn't get 50% of the votes, then he doesn't get elected. He or she doesn't get elected. What happens is that the candidate with the least number of first votes would have their preferences be reflected, and their votes would be counted. This would also help to make it more difficult to buy votes, because you have to guess who's going to get the least votes. and then you have to go and influence those people if you want to buy the votes, and it's not difficult because the people who get the least votes are probably diametrically opposed to you, or just so different from your core supporters. So did you? My first question is: did you consider the Australian preferential system of voting? My second question, if I may continue, my second question has to do with gender equality. I'm very pleased to hear about the gender responsive budgeting. I think this is an extremely progressive move, not because I'm a woman, I have to emphasize, but because studies around the world have shown that women are more responsible in certain ways. My own research in Thailand has shown that when you have the head of the household as a female, the spending on education, on health for the children is proportionately much higher than when the man, there's a man as a head of the household. So more responsible spending on the household, which would have long-term effects. So I'm very glad to hear about the gender responsive budgeting. But when it comes to gender quota, I have some reservations. I have a few. Dr. Thawilwadee said that gender means women. I think that's what she said. My first question is, which is a bit facetious, is what about LGBT? I'm not LGBT, but when you talk about gender and if you want to be progressive, maybe that's more inclusive. Secondly, a particular problem that we have in Thailand is that, if you have a quota for women, the particular problem that we see in Thailand is that when a male candidate gets disqualified or removed for some reason, the wives or the sister, take that place. So maybe it's maybe not. It may not serve the purpose for which it was intended. Why gender quota? What about occupational quota? Why not have farmers? Can farmers have a quota? That kind of thing. These are the questions that I have in mind. But more importantly, I feel that just one last comment. More importantly is that when you have a quota for a specific group of people, could that increase inequality? For example, could a woman from a high socioeconomic status be selected at the expense of a man from a lower socioeconomic status? Because women, to be able to be in that position, tend to be women from high income groups and so on. And so could that lead to greater inequality? So those are my questions.
Thank you for this. Actually, we have one article that mandate about the non-discrimination against people, and we also put the word gender in, เพศสภาพ, which is the first time that we have this word in the constitution. So that means we care about the human right. Yeah, and for gender quota, we see the importance of having access to opportunity, to get equal opportunity. But everyone is not the same. So that's why almost 100 countries in all over the world care about this and have gender quota mandate in the constitution or election system, and they provide reserved seat for the women group, for example. So that's why Thailand, we lag behind about this. Although 51% of the people of Thailand, or the population of Thailand, is women, but looking at the representation in the parliament so far, very small amount, less than 20%, 15% only. And looking at National Legislative Council now, only 6% of women, very small number. So we think of the representation. And we also care about the occupation quota, and we have it in the Senate system. We have that. And you will see, this is the first time that the representatives of farmers will become the senators in the parliament for the first time.
Okay, thank you. So you think that there should be some quota in the constitution? Okay. อาจารย์สุจิตครับอาจารย์เจต first อาจารย์เจต okay. Well, actually, either of you or both of you, when we go to vote, the three ballots, explain to us, just elaborate. I've studied this, but it would be very confusing to the voter, the way that it's going to be counted. So on top of that, preferential voting, did we look at the Australian model?
Yes.
Well, regarding the Australian preferential voting system, we had discussed it in our subcommittee meeting, which I chair. In fact, Ajahn Jade had introduced this, and we had a lot of quite thorough debate on that. But then finally, we come to the thinking that the MMP is complicated enough, so we don't want to introduce more complicated thing than the MMP. So the preferential voting system is quite interesting. I myself personally agree with that. But if you want to make it, our voting system workable for the populace over the country, we have to make it very simple. So I think MMP would be good enough, and leave it preferential to the future. Ajahn Jade might add something because he's the one who would agree with it. But before I give the floor to Ajahn Jade, let me comment on two short points. Short on 2 points. First, on the vote buying, I agree that we cannot tolerate the vote buying in our election system, but we cannot resolve it through the voting system alone. You see, so we need to do something more, like the law enforcement of the election commission. So this is the way that we try to divide the election commission's authority to be responsible for the law enforcement only, and the management of election would be in the hand of the so-called election management committee. So we want to empower the election commission to oversee the irregularities of the voting system to voters, as well as the vote buying. So throughout this way, I would say it would be better. And the other thing on the gender issue, let me explain it. When we agree to put the word genders as a right of the citizen, we use the Thai word เพศสภาพ, which เพศสภาพ in Thai would actually entails recognitions of differences in sexuality, which cover both sexual identity and sexual activities. So this draft constitution recognizes more than just the two sexes, but the differences in terms of sexuality and differences in this area. Thank you.
As Professor Suchit mentioned, in the subcommittee that Professor Suchit was chairing, I was tasked with explaining, because in our first kickoff, we talk about the election system, and then we talk about so many election system, and I raised about 6-7 different election systems. So our chairman here, Professor Suchit, asked me to present about 2 or 3 that I see fit from the most to the least. So I took STV, single transferable vote. I'm not sure whether perhaps some of you here might have touched upon it. And the AV that you were mentioning, the Australian one, the alternative vote. And I explained the way in which the quota works and the way in which people will number and all these other things. And the last one was the MMP. So for me, the third is the MMP. But at last, the majority chose the third. So, and MMP is not something not good, okay, but to me, I put all the pictures together, and the last point of our decision on the voting system in the committee, I also proposed to match up the comparison between STV and MMP, but then the majority still choose MMP, okay, and if you look into MMP, of course, there's so many good things about MMP, but it's discussable, if debatable, that each one of the system has its own count. I also proposed the border count in the constituency. I also proposed the DPR system, which is very new to the United Kingdom, and our friends here from the United Kingdom might be able to touch upon that. But there's so many election systems. Any one of them would work, but we will have to look into all the details, like Professor Suchit was mentioning, which will be working best in our country, considering the voters especially. So I just have that, but what we thought of it.
Is the new constitution also aiming to rebalance that, to strengthen checks and balances by giving more powers to the local level? Because that's, after all, the basic and most direct interface between people and the state.
In the draft constitutions, we proposed further decentralizations to the local authorities, like the municipalities and Obata and whatnot. They would be able to perform more functions and get more taxes and then more revenues, more power to do their own local activities. But at the same time, we have to make sure that the corruption practices seem to be widespread at the local level should be diminished and should be scrutinized effectively by authority concerned and as well as the people in the local communities. So we agree to that in the future, the people will get more say in terms of electing their own leaders in their communities up to the provincial levels.
So far, with all sort of measures, Thailand is lagging behind in all kind of measurements against neighboring countries. I would like to have a comment to Ajahn Siripan on your constructive criticism about unaccountability, unintended consequences. Many people talk about vote buying, patronage. I think there are a lot of conflict of interest quite rampant in Thailand, and that conflict of interest actually caused a lot of problems. With the poor performance of the country, I think people as a group have to be responsible for the outcome of managing the country. I think the voters and the politicians should together be held responsible for the outcome. Is it possible that we put the reform a bit further? That is, will in many democratic countries, there are actually a term for politicians, especially in the executive branch. Is it possible that this constitution also put a term for politicians? And the problem with other democratic countries are, if politicians are career politicians, they actually are self-serving. They are doing whatever that is good for themselves. That's a big conflict of interest against what is good for the country. So my question is, whether it's possible to put a limit on the number of terms that they can serve. So that will solve a lot of conflict of interest, the self-serving problem, the vote buying and patronage.
I think it's not very easy for us to convince that the MP who always popular among the people should be limit their own terms to 3 or 4 terms only. So it leave it to the people. But if we really want to get rid of the vote buying, I would say that we have to think in the longer terms, like to re-educate the people, because now vote buying is turned out to be a culture of the Thai people already. So we have to change this political culture, and that's why we emphasize the word citizens. And we need to have a reform in educational system to instill a new concept of the citizenship to the people. So this is the thing that it has been emphasizing in these constitutions, that the state is obliged to instill a new concept of citizenship among the people. So this is the longer term to get rid of the vote buying. But in the shorter terms, we need to enforce the rule and regulation on election very effectively. So it's up to the parties involved, the election system, the electoral commissions, as well as the other media as well, need to come to forward in order to help scrutinize this misbehavior of the electorates and the candidates. Thank you.
Okay, so Jade has just informed me that the term limit on a PM is 2 with 1 pause, and then it can come back. So no more than 2 consecutive terms. But if you take a break, then you can come back for 2 more consecutive terms. And then for the Senate, we used to have a 1-term Senate, 6 years. This time would be a 1-term Senate, except the first lot of the senators. They can come back a second time. Go ahead.
Just to elaborate on that, because we want the senators to be half out, half in every 3 years. So the first one would draw lots to go out, half of them. And so we still allow these halved to come back in the second term, only these halved. Then from then on, everybody will get to stay 6 years. It will only be these first halves of the people that will get possibly to stay 9 years, or otherwise they will get to stay only 3 years.
Okay, any last question, comment? If not, I want to come back to the panel. Dan Panitan, please give us the government's view of the timeline. The roadmap is still on course, everything, and then do you think that there will be a referendum? Just give us going forward, this is mid-April now, what can we expect in terms of the timetable?
I think the timetable is still on course, unless you have some major problems in the final drafting. But expected date is, I think, August, Suchit, August 6th, right? August 6th. Beginning of August, everything will be finished, and then in CPO and the cabinet will make a decision on the referendum. And I hope that Ajahn Suchit and his group, Ajahn Bawansak included, will convince the NCPO and the cabinet hard to have a referendum. Academics like us prefer a referendum. I'm not going to tell you what my preference is, but I can hear my colleagues sensing that they need a referendum. But different kinds of referendums are being studied now. A simple referendum, yes and no, is one. Sectorial, right? Sectorial referendums is also being studied. In other words, you vote on different sections of the Constitution, realizing that some of the sections have not changed very much in the last few constitutions, like the sections of the monarchy and secession. I think this is the same. But if sectorial referendums voted, then we may need time to go back, right, after the referendum to the CDC to take an account on what being voted. More complicated, more time maybe is allowed, and that is going to be an issue if whether or not the roadmap timeline is committed on course or not. It depends on these final processes. And of course, you know very well, I have many friends in different shades of politics. They told me that soon as we lift the martial law, which we did, they will begin to be more active. They would like to be on the streets as soon as they can to push their own agendas. So we are talking with them, negotiating with them, making sure that they participate in this final process in a very constructive way. And we hope, let's hope that that will go smooth without any trouble toward the end of the drafting and the referendum. In the end, I think the Thai people are very much, I am slightly in disagreement with Ajahn Siripan Nogsuan. It seems from the top that they are not active, but I've talked to many representatives, some in this room, who came from the local areas, some from Pheu Thai and some from Democrat parties. They have assured me that the people are very much interested in this process. They follow up very close, on this process. I'm not so sure you believe it or not. You talk to them, and of course, like it or not, they'll come, to the voting, referendum or not. In the end, I also slightly disagree with Ajahn Siripan Nogsuan in the sense that turning back the clock is not an option for us. Everybody knows. I think the Thai military, the Thai leaders are fully aware of the dynamics. This is why they are in place to manage the dynamics. I mean, we cannot turn back the clock. In the end, the Thai people love elections. Election is a festival for them. Return to normalcy, meaning that you need more and more elections. Elections make people lively. Elections make the town lively. Election makes things very vibrant. Even the military knows that. I think turning back that election dynamics is not going to be an option. But the problem is, how can you manage that dynamics to prevent people from killing each other? The red shirts, the yellow shirts, the colored shirts, they are now in different areas come to term that they need no killings to improve Thailand. And this is what the security agency is trying to do, to force them to come to terms that they need to work together without killing each other and damaging the country along the way. So we can leave the politics to the people in the end, in the next few months. Yeah.
Okay, ขอบคุณครับอาจารย์ So the roadmap and the constitutional time frame, if we remain on course, then we would expect, we could anticipate perhaps the citizenries having a say by first quarter or second quarter next year still.
And also you need to ask Ajahn Jade about how much time it takes to have organic laws to prepare for election, and that's up to him, not to us at the government. Yeah.
Okay, Ajahn Jade, organic laws, time frame, also the pros and cons. There's some discussions about referendum. First, just a wholesale referendum, yes or no, or sections, different sections. Perhaps you can discuss a little bit about that. And what about the politics of having or not having a referendum?
According to the organic law, we have two types of laws that need to be pushed out before the Constitution can work its way. One is the organic law mentioned by Ajahn Panitan. We have also two sets of organic laws. One is the main important organic laws, mainly for the election, which is the organic law on election commission, on election, and on the political parties. So these three will be the first one that will come out around 60 days after the Constitution is in place. The next group will be about 9 of them. plus another 15 essential laws. These will come out within 120 days of the Constitution. So the effective date of the Constitution, another 120 days. Then the last group will be the essential laws, which now we're trying to list up. So that will take 180 days. So within 6 months after the effective date of the Constitution, we will have all these laws in place, which we think around 40 laws, 40 essential laws, including the organic laws, will be pushed out. The reason we have to also put all these essential laws in place is because if you look back into the 1997 Constitution as well as the 2007 Constitution, there were to be so many laws to be coming out into place to bring the constitutional provision to practice, but those laws have never been enacted. So that was the problem. One of the main reasons was because the constitution were drafted, those two constitutions were drafted by one group, two groups of people, but the laws were supposed to be done by another many groups of people. So they might not know how to actually put things in the law. So we now attempt to put all the things from the constitutional provisions into the organic law as well as the essential laws. So hopefully we will be able to do it within 6 months, 40 some laws.
So that would put it at a minimum of the earliest would be February. Yeah. When the enabling laws would be completed, and then we would have to add a couple months for any kind of polling to take place. Suchit, okay, I think I'll give the last word to. Okay,
just add one thing about local administration. New things in this constitution is about contestability to provide public service. So you see that civil society or NGO or private sector compete to run for the public service business or any local administration or local government. We changed the name from องค์กรปกครองส่วนท้องถิ่น. Yeah, we changed it to local administration. They can compete with the central government to run the public service. That's the new thing. And one important new thing, because some people ask about the patronage system and concern about this. We don't allow public prosecutor to take a position in the public enterprise or in private sector anymore.
Okay, Ajahn Siripan will have the last word, and then we'll wrap up.
Right, I have 3 last topics that I would like to address. First, let me get back to Professor Panitan on turning the clock back. When I talked about turning the clock back, what in my mind is, for example, it seems that this constitution is transferring the power, a lot of power from elected bodies to non-elected bodies, especially the bureaucracy. It seems that Thailand will become again a bureaucratic polity, and as we know that the bureaucracies of Thailand is quite weak. When we talk about corruptions, a lot concerns over corruptions, we always finger the point to politicians, but actually there are triangles of power, that is politicians of course, bureaucracies as well, and business groups, and we hardly mention the other two. So with the intention to transfer the powers to bureaucracy, we witnessed in the constitution that, for example, the management of electoral system, casting the ballot, is transferred from election commission to a newly created body called electoral management body, right? And who will become the electoral management body? There are the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Education, Transportation, Agriculture, and so on and so forth. So my question is that these bureaucracies of Thailand is not that strong. A lot of weakness. This is my concern. This is turning back the clock. This is one example. My second point is to address the question of Kun Panya about vote buying. I think for me, And my research, I found that vote buying is prevalent, and I don't like it at all. I think it's a problem. It's a disease. But my finding is that vote buying is no longer determine who win elections in many constituencies, in many cases. So we need to try to eliminate vote buying. One thing that I found very effective to reduce vote buying in Thailand is proportional representation electoral system or party list vote. And I'm glad that the CDC maintained that and changed it to the MMP. And I don't have a problem with MMP. But like I said, when we, again, use it with open list system, that is a problem. You see, Professor Jade said that no country in this world, 9 countries using MMP in this world, no country use it with open list system. I think there's a reason for that. There's a good reason for that. And open list in Thailand will bring out candidate-oriented mode of competition, and that is a problem because not only vote buying will become more prevalent and a problem, it will create internal party conflicts, and the parties will become weaker, and the effectiveness of party in introducing more concrete policies, doable policies will be reduced. And I think that's a problem because we need good, effective party system for Thailand to walk on the road to democracy. And my last point is that if we insist that we love election, we need to find a way to make it meaningful, not devalue it. Thank you very much.
On that note, I think this is not going to be the last forum that we will discuss constitutional issues, constitution crafting 2015, 2016. We do have something in common here. We are trying still, after 20 years, trying to address this money politics. You know, Thai politics is more about business than government. And we're trying to make it become more about government and good government than just business. We have a coup cycle, we have a coup, constitution, election, corrupt government, coup, constitution, election, corrupt government, coup, and so on. We're trying to still get out of that cycle, that vicious cycle. Please join me in thanking the panels, the panelists, all of them for their time, especially Ajahn Suchit missing or postponing his dental appointment, and Ajahn Panitan from government work, Ajahn Siripan from academic work, and the others, constitution drafters. Thank you very much. Our next event will be on the 20th on Thai Myanmar, and then 21st on AEC. Thank you.